Let's get cleaning. This, well, I haven't done any videos about it yet, but for anyone who has talked to me personally, you would know that after I built the DIY CNC machine, CNC router really, but sort of heavy duty CNC router, and I will show that in a bit. But when I built it, my big issue was the bed. I was never happy with the bed. I've tried a couple different things, never felt that it was as level as I was hoping for. And more recently, when I got back from tour, I started re-looking at the bed issue. And my big thing was actually, my big issue was it not being perfectly level. I can show some issues that I was having with it, but suffice to say, it was never quite as, it was nowhere near perfect, and it was not even actually within a tolerance that I was happy with. Tried a couple different things, nothing really ever seemed to work out. Went round and round. I started looking into getting a cast iron surface plate. So basically, almost like what you would use, I think at certain points, sometimes they're called fixture plates, sometimes they're called surface plates. They may be slightly different, they look about the same. But in essence, just imagine a plate like you would use a granite surface plate, but made out of cast iron and cast to be perfectly flat and level. Those are really cool. You can actually get them fairly inexpensively, but it turns out the only place you can actually find them is in a place called Euclid, Ohio. It's the only place on eBay, or the only eBay seller that I could find that had these sort of cast iron surface plates that were appropriate for what my use, my purpose. It turned out that, you know, to ship these things, they're sometimes upwards of 500 pounds. To ship these things would have been more expensive than the unit itself and probably put it kind of out of reach. So the idea was either to drive to Euclid, Ohio, which also would be expensive, or have this thing shipped freight, and it was getting a little crazy. So what I started doing is I was on Craigslist, my local Craigslist, looking somewhat wider than my local Brooklyn area, but looking in New York, upstate New York, Connecticut. I looked a lot in Connecticut because I figure with so many of the manufacturers of big heavy metal machinery being up there, I thought maybe there would be some, oh, for God's sake, I thought maybe there would be some places up there that might have some for sale. So anyway, I look around, and when I'm searching for cast iron, what comes up in some of the searches are the tables for a table saw on vintage table saws. Not the modern ones, because those are typically done a little bit cheaper, I think, unless you're getting a really expensive one. But the older ones were all made out of cast iron. The older ones, like what you see here. So I started looking around, and I found a couple local, but they were all kind of crappy and not exactly the right size. I knew I needed to get something roughly in the size, the bed size I was looking for. And I found some on eBay, and I was able to get this bed from an old 1950s Rockwell table saw for $80 shipped. And I figured with it being that cheap, it wasn't going to be so heavy. I figured it would be heavier than what I've been dealing with now with the aluminum, but you know, not so crazy. When it arrived, moving it was a bitch. It is heavy as hell. I would say it's got to be probably nearly 100 pounds, which is fine because what I'm using this for is a sub bed. I have a steel plate, and you know, I'll show that in the future videos or in this video later on. I have a steel plate that is the sub bed. Then I have currently some T-track, aluminum T-track that I had purchased. Like I said, it never worked quite well. It's not up to, it probably would be fine for people that are doing wood, so they're barely clamping down things, but when I'm clamping down a vise to machine aluminum, I'm basically distorting the T-track, the aluminum T-track. So the idea was to get something that I could have the steel subplate, remove the aluminum T-track, and then actually have this on top of the steel plate. It has bungs, threaded bungs on the bottom, obviously to have attached it to the table saw. And so I am going to put this on top of the steel plate. I'm going to bolt it to the steel plate, so that's going to be a little bit. I'm going to have to drill a bunch of holes in steel. I'm going to attach this to the steel plate. I'm going to put this on top of the machine, and then I am going to machine some aluminum tooling plate to be the size that basically the working size that I need. That can always be swapped out. So I will be drilling some holes in this cast iron to mount. I'll make sure that I kind of do some measurements to make it a fairly universal size, that if I end up going with a smaller or larger tooling plate for different uses, I will be able to actually always bolt it into the same bolt holes, or the various bolt holes I make. And I think that should be killer. I am just cleaning this off right now. Using some red Scotch-Brite right now. There was a little bit of paint. They sort of warned you when you purchased it that these older beds might come with a little bit of paint splatter and, various crap that people would have gotten on here when they were using it as a table saw. It was not that bad. I was able to clean it up fairly quickly. I'm just going over it a little bit more and more with Scotch-Brite to make sure there's no raised portions. Then I'm going to go over it with a honing stone, just lightly. Again, this doesn't have to be 1000% perfect. I just need this to be fairly level. And for the price that this was and the ease of shipping, I mean, they just shipped it FedEx ground. And although my neighbor who had to bring it inside was not exactly happy, when it arrived, it actually was way more manageable. I believe that the other thing, the surface and or fixture plates that I was looking at were upwards of 500 pounds. So dealing with that would have been a nightmare. Actually getting that all set up correctly would have been a nightmare. Now, the big issue that I am going to have to deal with, I'm not going to use these slots, these miter slots. The issue I am going to deal with is I'm going to likely I actually thought about milling this out to accept a vise so it would be sunken so I get a little bit more Z height. But I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a plate that goes in here that just covers it over. It's not a big deal, again, because I am going to have thick 3/4 inch tooling plate on top of it when it's actually on the machine. But I just figured I'd show you guys what I was working on. I'm going to get into honing here in a second, just to kind of run over. I will say there's only one gouge right there. That's actually going to be out of my work zone anyway, or primary work zone. And again, as long as that doesn't throw off the tooling plate, as long as it's sunken and not raised, I have no problem with that. Again, it doesn't need to be 1000% perfect. It just needs to be heavy, sturdy, and ready to go. Yeah, I'm going to get the hone ready, and then we'll move on. I wanted to show the stuff that I'm using to do the cleaning is this stuff called CLP, break free. The CLP stands for Cleaner Lubricant Preservative. It's actually some really good stuff. I use it on the lathe and the bandsaw bed and actually even the drill press bed. Anything that needs a little bit of protection, but it's great for cleaning before you get to the protection part. And then it does leave, well, supposedly it leaves a bit in there in the very minuscule grains. So anyway, I'm going to take this stone and just lightly. I have to say, they always say, it's amazing how well the human eye can see the differences between just a few thousandths. And it is true. If you look at something and if you're looking at a part you're machining, and you're looking real close, you can actually see, you might not know exactly how different it is, but you can see that there is a difference. I would say that the human hand is very similar. You can feel when there's just slight imperfections. I believe there is a story about a princess sleeping on a boatload of mattresses who could feel the difference. And honestly, when you run across a pretty darn flat plate, you can feel the differences. I feel a little bit right in here. I feel like it's pretty clean, but I'm going to do a little bit more scrubbing before I get the honing stone going. Right in there. I haven't decided which orientation I'm going to use when it's time to put this onto the bed. The metal plate is squared to the bed, so I can drill the holes in that any way I need to. There's a specific order I need to do these things to make it as smooth of a transition as possible. I'm going to be machining the tooling plate with the bed as is, so that I have it ready to go and I don't have to worry about it when I put it on here. But I believe this is one of those classic examples of they don't make them like they used to. I mean, maybe some super high-end table saws, which I don't know a ton about, come with a bed this solid. But this would have been your typical home table saw. This was not a professional, as far as I understand, table saw model. It just came with a bed that was a brick shit house right from the factory. Good news is this divot is not raised, which is awesome. I feel pretty good about this backside, or front side, depending. There's a slightly chamfered edge on the corner here, which obviously won't affect any truing up the bed, but I'll get it clean because I keep feeling it. So right there. Almost. Just a few slight divots, but really it's in remarkable shape for our purposes here. It's going to work great. I'm really excited. Flipping this over is going to be insane. Carrying it in here was insane. Flipping it over is going to really probably break the back, but it's worth it. Actually, getting it on the machine is going to be crazy when it's attached to a steel plate. It's feeling pretty good. I'm going to run a square over it just to make sure. And I got to decide where to put the holes in here. Should be a whole nother thing, but. right, let's get a square, see how we're doing.